Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
Fellow citizens, following the sequence of events, Uganda seems to be at political crossroads.
I'm not a servant of anybody.
Madam, I know the law.
As such, Alternative Digital brings you the Interface Show with retired Colonel Dr. Kiza Besuje.
Let's keep on the same page on Alternative Digitalk.
As he gives you the alternatives on the transition question, rule of law, human rights and freedom, youth inclusion in governance, economic stagnation, as he confirms.
I'll be always here, Saturday from 10 a.m. in the morning. Be there.
Don't miss the live discussion on the Alternative Uganda, Digitalk TV Facebook pages, and the Alternative Uganda YouTube channel.
The Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
Our viewers, good evening from Kampala City in Uganda as a country, East Africa as a sub-region, should we call it, and also Africa at large. My name is Norman Tumuhimbise, and every Wednesday around this time, that is 7 p.m. Ugandan time or East African time, which we are sure as day follows night, that in the Caribbean it's midday, that's 12 p.m. In our Afro-Caribbean show tonight, I am Norman Tumuhimbise with my co-host who will chip in later in a few seconds. We stream live on our social media pages, that's the Alternative Uganda Facebook page and also Digitalk TV Facebook page. Means later the very show is uploaded onto our YouTube channel. That's the Alternative Uganda as well. I will cross to my co-host to say hello to our viewers, and then we shall literally introduce to you the person we are having that we shall host right away from Guyana, so that he can share a lot that happens there. Yes, to you, Rogers.
Thank you so much. Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. That is from Uganda, Kampala, and any other region that we have the same time zones. My name is Rogers Toyawe, and it's a great honor today to be here on this discussion with a gentleman who is also a Conium. He's Rogers Winston, so he's going to introduce himself. I'm glad that he's Conium, so I look forward to the discussion that we're going to have with him.
And I hope you don't fear to ask him hard questions because you share the name. So, yes, Rogers, hands over to Rogers. Rogers, let's hear from you.
Well, a very good, I think it's evening there in Uganda, Africa, where you guys are broadcasting from. So good evening to the viewers of Uganda, Africa. Good evening to everybody right across the continent of Africa. My name is Ossie. I'm your brother. I am a Guyanese. I was born in Guyana, and I reside in the United States. However, I'm very active in the politics and community activities, social activities in my country. So a very good evening to all Guyanese that are also joining us, and our Caribbean brothers and sisters. I noticed them is called Afro-Caribbean Link. So it is indeed a pleasure for me to share this platform with you guys. Looking forward to taking your questions, answering your question to the best of my ability, and looking forward for a great conversation with you guys. I would say also that I was following your some of your past programs, and I am very happy that you guys are seeking to national journalism and ask questions, and based on what I've seen with you guys in the past, you seem to be fair and balanced. So I want to say kudos to you guys on that, and thanks for having me.
I will begin straight away. You know, being a media practitioner, that side, I think for purposes of records, we understand that journalism is just like a wider course, just like you see lawyers, that it cuts across. So in most cases, unlike other courses where a graduate of such a course is restricted into a specific area, with journalists, at least we know that you people cut across. Share with us, first of all, on whether or not the media freedoms in Guyana such freedoms are guaranteed, on whether you have liberty to speak what you want, and also you are guaranteed that even when you have spoken whatsoever or exposed whatsoever you have, you go home at liberty. Not also forgetting that we have literally also heard from some, I cannot call them critics, but people who say, no, Mr. Rodgers, he's a government apologist. He won't share to the depth about how rights are being violated. Journalists' rights are being violated. What do you have to say? Are you pro or otherwise? Or because literally, journalism people will say you ought to be neutral. Are you or you're not?
I am a neutral person. However, I do have a political belief. I have a political. I do believe that I should be able to express my political view. And one of the things that I want to say to you, that those same persons who may have said to you that I am a government apologist, I can refer to them as opposition apologists. But what I can say to you, my brothers, is that I want to, anything that I say here can be backed up with facts and can be, and with that, I'm taking this opportunity right now.
We seem to be having some issues with his network, but most likely we'll come back. He will come back and get to us and definitely answers the questions whether or not they will be hard or simple. In the meantime, we have with me. Okay, sure, yeah, continue. We're trying to. Okay, Rodgers. The Rodgers of Guyana.
Yeah. So I guess we were interrupted, but I'm saying to you that my responsibility, yes, as a journalist, the facts and to tell you guys exactly what is going on the ground. One of the things I point out to you right off the bat also is that I have been doing my research. I see what is going on there, and you have pointed out to one of those same opposition apologists that you saw them protesting and they were free to go home. No police came and locked them up. No police came and beat them. No police came and did them anything. That shows that they have freedom to express themselves, even though sometimes that freedom that they take for granted borders on abuse. They take abuse sometimes of that freedom and lie and instigate people in order to act in a violent manner. But our Guyanese people, for the most part, are smart and are disciplined and don't fall for the rhetoric of those persons. So I want to, I'll leave it there and I'll give you an opportunity to ask more questions, and I will be happy to answer all of them.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rodgers. I am Rodgers myself. I want to understand, even before we said, because from when you asked a question, your sort of defense was, when the question was, are you a regime apologist? You are like, those who are saying that are opposition apologists. Now that says something. So I wanted to begin with, what is your profession? Are you a journalist by profession? So that maybe will set a foundation for the rest of the discussion, so that we know that you're giving us from a professional journalist perspective, not an individual who just owns a camera and sits in front of it.
No, sir, I'm a journalist. For me, my entire working career, I've been in journalism. I've been a radio announcer for 20 odd years. I've written for newspapers in Guyana. As a reporter, I've hosted television programs on government and private television stations in the United States, in Guyana, and in the Caribbean. As a matter of fact, I have worked as a radio announcer at ZDK Radio in Antigua, a Caribbean island, and I've also worked, do some work for a radio station in Trinidad called WAC Radio Station, which is located in San Fernando, Trinidad. So I've worked in the Caribbean as a journalist also. So I just want to point that out to you. And I work here in the United States as a journalist. I have a radio and a television program here in the United States. That's my profession.
insight. I want to ask you a straight question, if I may you apply the word. You have seen so many countries running battles with journalists. In particular, when those journalists expose the ill deeds of a sitting government. With your introduction, you seem to have said and suggested that people have had freedoms to demonstrate and do A, B, C, and Z, and they are untouched. Most likely, you wanted to communicate that also journalists that side are untouchables. I mean, they don't touch them. But then, aren't you touched just because you are a regime apologist, or it's a general treatment to the rest of your colleagues, even those that tend to expose the wrong deeds of PPP government?
Well, like I said before, I have not seen any situation in Guyana where there's government sponsored oppression of journalists or anything like that, or journalists being victims or discriminated against by any member of the ruling party. And these things, if any had happened, it would have been well ventilated on social media and on the traditional media in Guyana and here in the United States, and I'm sure throughout the world, and you guys would have seen that also. Journalists in Guyana are free to do their work, and they're not interrupted by anything that the government might do or anything like that. Now, there are journalists who also seek to report the truth about what is going on, and they sometimes come up and are victimized or discriminated against by colleagues in the journalistic profession and those that make connections to the underworld, and that is those are facts. But it's not government sponsored. There's nothing there that's government sponsored, and trust me, I can assure you that if the People's Progressive Party civic government ever did anything, that might look like it's a disrespect or against the law, against any journalist, trust me, it will be reported in every single corner of the world, especially all the way to the United States government. I can assure you that.
Good to hear. I wanted to also ask, I don't know whether your namesake can also have something, but I wanted to also ask on whether or not in your area of operation, of course, to do journalism work, have you, for some reason, are you convinced that every single right and freedoms of your colleagues are guaranteed, no matter whether or not they are opposition apologists? And I repeat the same question, rather that for emphasis, that I was wondering on whether you as Rodgers and your colleagues who are, because you already said that you subscribe to some party, and also to ask on whether your safety is because you belong to the other side of the bridge, or it's an overall for all of you, it's a collective that no matter who belongs where, all your freedoms are guaranteed.
Yes, no, my safety and freedom to operate in Guyana in the media fraternity is not protected by any political party. And I would point out there's a young man by the name of Andrew Weeks who is a PNC, member, right? Member of the opposition party. He goes out, he spread lies. He spread half-truths, distruths, and all kinds of things. He's there at every single protest, doesn't even understand what the issue is and why they're protesting, but seek to instigate people. And Andrew Weeks is still walking free. Nobody does him anything. Nobody targets him, and there are many, many others. They are members of the media in Guyana who sometimes you look at their reporting and you have to question whether they have done any research or anything like that. The former president referred to the media in Guyana as lazy, and they are members of the media.
We seem to lose you. I hope you can reconnect and we hear you once again. Anyhow, as we wait for Rogers, let me switch to the Ugandan Rogers here. Oh, you're back. Okay, fine. Proceed. You are saying that one of your colleagues
Yes,
who belongs to
I am
the
saying to you that
opposition.
they are journalists in Guyana who disguise as journalists, but they really have a political motive, and their stories are angled in a certain way to.
We are afraid we are losing you once again. I was trying to say, in the meantime, as you come back, we would have now the Ugandan Rogers to, to share, from what his namesake is saying. You know what amuses me is where he says that this journalist gives out false information. And I was wondering on whether, so who blames the other? In the event that we have the other person who will equally say that also Rogers he misinforms people. And this is, I think it's now becoming a norm with some of the journalists, depending on which angle one is standing. For example, Rogers, you're back. Please go ahead and tell us, why do you think that your colleagues, some of your colleagues, give imbalanced stories, and now with the Rogers, you are giving us the balanced story?
I think his network is...
Okay,
his network is as he gets back with his network, he makes some very interesting comments. Because I would assume that a person who is, first of all, unbiased, because, of course, I respect the fact that every person believes in a particular party ideology in their country and politics.
So as long as they don't apply it in their profession.
Exactly, that's one thing. But when he's giving his introduction, he speaks mostly about someone who is in the opposition, one who is leaning on the PNC. I was watching some of his shows, and most of them are really about the PNC, which is an opposition party in Guyana. So I wanted to get his perspective, how now he's telling us that he's so balanced, he's the one who is balanced, and how he spends every single day speaking about the opposition individuals, and not just even the issues in the opposition, but the individuals themselves speak about how some of them do not have the direction. So I want to understand.
As we even wait for him to come back on board, I wanted to ask him on whether he has had that courtesy to record and disseminate the demolitions that took place in Guyana some months ago, some human rights violations, because he says, if we may quote him, he's balanced. So I want to hear on whether, in his, balancing the, the profession vis-a-vis the political party he believes in, whether he was even in position to, has he gone ahead to expose? And also to ask him, as a journalist, has he seen any symptoms or acts of racism in Guyana? That's when we shall perhaps believe that, true, Rogers is, he's balanced in his works.
As seeing some of his social media handles, and most of them, he actually said there is no racism in Guyana. In fact, if there is, it's the PNC. I don't know.
So PNC creates it?
I don't know what issues he has with PNC, but he said that the only form of racism that is in Guyana is spread by the PNC and no one else. So I look forward to listening to him. But even as he comes back, I wanted our producer to play a short video of his speech on the International Press Freedom Day, which was, I think, earlier this week, about 2 days ago, if I'm not mistaken, or so. So I want them to play that video, and then maybe it will give us another beginning of a discussion that he can also elaborate on.
As we continue today to celebrate World Press Freedom Day, our task here on this panel is to discuss the rise of citizens, reporters, and social media influencers, and to examine the trend. It is my humble opinion that, like mainstream media, social media influencers and citizens reporters has played and will continue to play a gatekeeping-like role in disseminating information and current affairs activity. While social media influencers' style of bringing information to the public can be described as a departure from journalism correctness, I am led to believe that the consumers of this style of reporting would prefer to focus on the information being delivered rather than who is delivering it. More like, let us focus on the message and not the messenger. My friends, The rise of social media can be considered a blessing and also a cause for concern at the same time. Not all social media influencers are equal. Many countries around the world are seeing an increased threat to their democracies as social media is used to spread disinformation and outrageous fake news. And here in Guyana, our people continue to face an onslaught of half-truths, race baiting, intimidation, character assassination, and downward lies and fake news peddled on social media, mainly by, and this is my opinion, ladies and gentlemen, mainly by social media influencers attached to the main opposition party in this country. I believe this is done to keep an otherwise irrelevant political party relevant. Finally, I am of the firm belief that the free-for-all social media platforms would need more policing so as to safeguard against unscrupulous influencers who sometimes pose a threat to democracy and even life, as was the case with the misleading information regarding COVID and the vaccines.
Okay, thank you so much, and I hope our guest is back. I hope your network is okay now. It's jumping on and off, but we'll go nevertheless. Now, Mr. Rodgers, Mr. Winston Rodgers, I want to get your perspective on what you think social media is doing as far as journalism and reporting, community reporting is concerned, and if you think it does a good job in the community. And of course, I'm deriving this from the speech that you gave on the International Press Freedom Day as a journalist, a professional one at that. And then as you give us also your idea about social media as one, I want you to also give us your idea on what you think the freedom of speech means. Thank you.
All right, so I believe, and I came under some flack for this one. I believe that freedom of expression comes with a certain degree of responsibility. And like I said at the World Press Conference Day Symposium, the rise of social media, especially those who post on social media. Social media is a good thing, and it is a cause of concern at the same time. We saw how many people lost their lives because of social media when the world was going through a pandemic, when there were all sorts of fly-by-night professionals and fly-by-night persons, experts who came up and spoke against these very vaccines that save lives. We saw on social media, there were people who were sparring up and speaking against these vaccines, and persons who were following some of these persons who were promoting this information, and persons lost their life, unfortunately. I spoke about what happened at the U.S. Capitol, again, social media, what was sparring in social media. Only a few days ago, some of the doctors on what happened at the U.S. Capitol were convicted of sedition, and they're going to face the wrath of abusing their privilege to go live for free. So I believe that social media is a good thing overall, but we would need a
Just a bit right there. Okay, I think the network is really...
To reconnect and we hear from you. Because what I wanted to ask him was, he mentioned in his speech that there are intimidations. So I wanted to find out. Okay, sure.
Please carry on.
Yeah, so I was coming to the end of my little talk there by saying that I believe that there must be some degree of, for those of us who post and have youth followings on social media, there must be some degree where we must be able to take responsibility if we go out and abuse these platforms and cause people to operate in a dangerous manner, or people to lose their life, or people to property to be damaged. We've seen all of this being used by social media. And of course, on the flip side, we've seen social media being able to carry information that is relevant and pertinent. Social media also assisted in carrying the good messages of the vaccine during the COVID-19 pandemic, and social media also assisted to save lives also. So there's
carry on, your network, you're sort of on and off. All right, as he gets back, he said in that speech that, and I want to just quote exactly what he said so I do not put my own words. He said, free for all media platforms should be policed to avoid influencers who pose a threat to democracy. Now, I do not understand what democracy means that does not have freedom of opinion. And the same person is saying, a professional journalist, that the social media platforms that are free for all should be policed.
And this is actually what worries me and so many other people that tend to, to suppress he who has a phone and wants to record and disseminate whatever they've seen. What you would rather work on is, like Mr. Rodgers says, if that is a threat to democracy, then let democracy be democratic. You don't have democracy that is not democratic. To add, you would rather ask that, okay, if there is no racism, if there, for example, there are no beatings, let's borrow a leaf in a leaf of an any African country, that the police will beat you for, let's say, for exposing the potholes in some road. What about if you worked on the potholes? So that means the bloggers won't have anything.
Exactly. They have nothing to.
They have nothing to expose or to misinform about. So where an influencer maybe misinforms in quotes with, let's say, 20 potholes, it means there should be maybe around 19. And therefore he adds one pothole to make 20, and then some people might consider that as misinformation. Yes, Mr. Rodgers of Guyana, not the Rodgers that we have here. You talked of all these influencers and social media people that literally use social media to pass on information should be policed. And while you were away due to the ups and downs of the network, we are trying to dissect this and by saying that isn't it fair that the people you would rather ask to police the users of social media, they rather first police what government ought to do? Because social media bloggers won't come and lie that there are racists when the contracts are being given out, fairly to the rest of the people. The social media bloggers won't come and portray potholes or, government or, government's infrastructure or demolishing buildings, and then you want to put the blame. Why wouldn't you advise that the government rather fixes what you think the social media bloggers or influencers would use as their tool, and literally to, like you call it, as to misinform the rest of the public?
Well, first of all, I wanna point out that when I use the word police, you might have a different understanding of policing in African context as in policing in this part of the world. So I want to point that out. Policing does not mean brute force and ignorance here in this part of the world. Policing just means that you have safeguards in place in case of default, in case of defaulters, in case of unscrupulous actors. It doesn't mean that you go in and you take away people's rights and freedoms. That's not what I meant when I use the word policing. What I meant is you're putting the safeguards to ensure that those who come on the social media platforms and abuse the systems, there is recourse for victims. For example, right now here in the United States, they're talking about it is huge where drug dealers are using social media to sell drugs. Those are the type of things I'm talking about that needs policing, needs the safeguards in place to ensure that we protect the most vulnerable in our community.
Let me ask you just one more a minute of your time, sir. You jumped off earlier, but I had this question for you particularly. You talk about, you said, and I'm going to quote it again, in your speech during the International Press Freedom Day, you said, free for all media platforms should be policed to avoid influencers who pose a threat to democracy. Now, I want you to give us the meaning of democracy and the freedom of opinion that people are entitled to, and tell me how that works when you police the social media, that is a free space for people to express themselves.
First of all, sir, democracy does not mean do as you like, break the law, just jump on and you just do whatever once it does not mean that. Democracy, there's a certain aspect of respect that comes under the cloak of democracy. There's a certain aspect of rights and freedoms that are guaranteed, yes, under democracy, but you can't, it cannot be a free-for-all platform where people just go and engage in illegal activities or say things that might be legal and they are covered under the freedom to express themselves or under the cloak of democracy. That cannot be so. But like I said before, I want to make sure I point it out again, that when I talk about policing, you might have a different idea of policing in your part of the world. And this is not a knock on you, my brother, or anything like that. Because I've I've watched some of your programs, and I watch what policing is what policing is sometimes. I'm not saying that's all the time, but I see what policing is in Uganda. I've seen some videos. I've seen some that you've posted here on this platform. That type of policing is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the type of policing that go at defaulters, not take away rights and freedoms, but go after defaulters and lawbreakers.
Also realize, sir, that when you talk about policing, it is more of, because the thing with free social media is the freedom of opinion, that someone has a right to think what they think and say what they say, and they are responsible for what they say. You cannot tell someone that you must say this and you must not say this. So I want to understand again, as a professional journalist and as a person who lives in the United States of America, a place that is known for democracy, the fathers of democracy, how do you understand democracy when you want to police the thoughts and conscience of the people?
You're not policing the thoughts and consciousness of the people. You're policing the expression on public platforms of those thoughts. You cannot police people's thoughts. You cannot police people's ideas. You cannot police people's mind, but you're policing the expression of those thoughts when they are dangerous and pose a threat to life and pose a threat to others and property. Then is when you should be policing that. If I'm getting you right, then you were thinking that democracy means do as you want, anytime you want, to whoever you want, whenever you want, and nobody says nothing. That's not what it is. There's democracy, and it comes with a degree of responsibility, a responsibility to act in a, and go outside of those railings, those guardrails that are sure that that property and humans are safe and that sort of time. If you go outside of those guardrails and your postings or your expressions, not what you think, but your expressions, offend, then is when the policing comes in.
It's also itching. It's about to come out. Maybe I could just pass it on to Rodgers. Rodgers of Guyana. You know, I have two Rodgerses.
Winston, let's call him
Winston. Okay, Mr. Winston. This is it from me. You seem and sound so passionate about policing. Do you have any specifics in regards to how you would want or wish, not only in Guyana but also globally, how you think the powers that be can police and ensure that the social media users and influencers use social media, in a just and fair way? In your view, what are those specifics you would do in the event that you had capacity to do so?
Well, as in every intervention in the world, we set rules and laws to govern them. We built cars years ago, then we set rules and regulations on how to properly operate your cars or motor vehicle in order that it does not pose a danger to the public. We made airplanes, we did the same thing. We made radio. We did the same thing when we made radio. We put in laws, safeguards in place to ensure that medium was not going to be used to place people's property and people's lives in danger. So you put in rules and regulations as it relates to that. Hence, that's what I meant when I mean policing. You put in rules and regulations when it comes to when we start having cell phones. You put in rules and regulations to govern that. We didn't have rules and regulations governing cell phones or cars or television or radio or anything before they became a thing. So now that social media is a thing, we have to put in rules and regulations in place to ensure that those who use this free platform use it in a responsible manner, that it does not pose a threat to human life. It does not pose a threat to others. Now, expressing an opinion on social media, you have to be responsible for what you express, because the mere idea that you're putting it in the public domain, there are people who are going to consume that information. You can influence how they think based on that. You understand me? So when that expression is borders on inciting people to act in a certain way that is against the law, there is where I'm talking about the policing comes in. And this has nothing to do with democracy. Democracy, there are certain rights that are enshrined in democracy. Once you go outside of those rights, you will, in most cases, have to be held responsible for that.
Rogers should now proceed with you.
That's right. Thank you so much for that enlightenment. You actually have a point. But now I want to check just one thing for especially you, the person who thinks that free for all platforms should be regulated and that kind of stuff. On the 19th of April, 2020, you said yourself, Winston Rodgers, that the PNC has ties to terrorists. I want you to give us facts and relate that to how, if the regulations were in place, that would turn out for you. And tell us if that was a fact.
Well, I would love to give you facts, sir. I certainly would love to give you facts. Thank you very much for asking me that question. There was a man by the name of Abdul Kadir, a PNC mayor of a PNC stronghold town in Linden, Guyana, where I was born. Abdul Kadir was a mayor of Linden and also a member of parliament for the People's National Congress. Abdul Kadir was arrested, brought to the United States, charged and convicted for attempting to blow up pipelines at the John F. Kennedy International Airport, putting and hurting hundreds of thousands of people who traverse the John F. Kennedy Airport every day. And like I said before, he was a financial member of the PNC. He was a mayor of the Linden town, and he was also a member of parliament for the PNC. There are your facts, sir.
All right. So let me ask just again one more, actually two. One, did the government do an investigation to establish that the PNC as one was a part of whatever was going on, because you said PNC, not the person? And two, I want to relate to the current sitting person, in fact, your vice president right now. He's a person, you know, the Sugate scandal, you know, his not convictions, but allegations about corruption and stuff like that. Would you say now that the PPP is corrupt because the vice president is involved in the corruption allegations?
First of all, sir, you heard we're talking about two different things. We're talking about Abdul Kadir, who was a financial member and a leading member of the PNC, and he was not charged and convicted in Guyana. He was brought here to the United States. The United States ain't gonna go to Guyana and just pick up a man and arrest him and charge him because of his views. They had to have sufficient evidence to bring him to the United States, and a court in the United States that has nothing to do with Guyana convicted him of terrorist activities, right? So those are facts that you can research right now on your cell phone. The vice president and the suit, those are allegations, sir. Allegations are made every single day against every single person in the People's Progressive Party civic. Some very dangerous, but those are allegations. You cannot go around at charging people based on allegations. You have to do investigations and find the
The Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for just what happened. A bit of network here and there actually does interrupt the streaming. But the gentleman, Mr. Winston, was still telling us, comparing the two things. I wanted to understand the two things. He said that the PNC, he talked about the party, not the individual. And my issue is certainly not about the individual who was convicted. My issue is about how the party was linked. And I was trying to get the meaning of the facts, as he put it, saying that, the social media should be policed because of misinformation. And I want to understand from you. I'm glad you're back, sir. So the reason in the president is one. You said that the PNC had to have ties with terrorists. PNC, not the individual. The individual have no business with him. So I was also trying to understand, would you translate it to also, since the vice president is also involved in corruption allegations, because there's actually a video going around, I saw that video myself, would you say that PPP is now corrupt because one person is in the corruption allegations and scandals?
Right. So I'm happy that I get an opportunity to explain this once again. It was not an allegation that was made against the PNC about their ties to terrorism. It is a known fact. It was established based on the fact that Mr. Abdul Qadir of Linden was a mayor of the PNC, a leading member, a financial supporter. He became member of parliament for the PNC. All right? And upon his time of arrest and brought to the United States, he was still a leading functioning member in the town of Linden for the PNC. So the PNC was tied to Mr. Abdul Qadir, who was tied to terrorism, who was actually convicted for terrorism here in the United States. So that is why I can say that they were tied to terrorism, because they were tied to him. He was a leading member in the party. He served as a mayor of one of their strongest communities, what used to be one of their strongest communities in Guyana, one of their strongest tongue in Guyana. Now, the allegations leveled against the vice president are just those. They are allegations. One person says something. I can get up tomorrow and make an allegation against you. Does that mean that you have to that you should be branded corrupt just because I say that this happened? Where are the facts to back it up? Allegations are not evidence. There's no evidence to support that anybody, including the vice president, has ever been involved in anything like that. One man said that. That's all it is. He said that. One person said it. We have people saying things every day in Guyana against leaders. Not only leaders of with all fairness, not only leaders of the PPP, but also leaders of the PNC, leaders of civil society. There are allegations that are made every single day against leaders. You cannot just dismiss a person based on allegations. An investigation is what brings forward evidence. Or that person said without no shred of evidence. So you're going to brandish the whole PPP as corrupt because one person said something?
Mr. Rodgers, I want to take you for these few seconds, rather minutes that we have. I want to take my portion, and literally your namesake will also close it alone. I have keenly, and I repeat keenly, listened in to your submissions. In regards to how you have too much confidence and belief that Mr. Abdul Qadir was more or less, even when he was convicted, you have no doubt that whatever he was doing was more or less backed by PNC. This is my concern.
I never use the word back.
Where in this
I never use the word back. I use the word tied to.
Where in this world?
I never use the word back.
Pardon?
I never used the word that it was backed by the PNC. I said that he was tied to the PNC and he was a leading member of the PNC and he was convicted here in the United States. And how it goes in the world, once you were convicted, unless those convictions are overturned, that conviction means that there was enough evidence to point that you, yes, indeed, have done it.
Great, Mr. Rogers, this is the point.
Charges
now.
is a different thing, but once we get the conviction, there's not only the Supreme, only a court higher than the court that convicted you can say no, it hasn't been that way, or on some technicality.
I deeply hear you. This is my concern now, that we would want to guide our viewers and the entire Guyanese who believe in democracy and also political parties, that once you mention it strongly that, okay, he was an ally, he was a very strong member of PNC, and therefore having been convicted of whatever charges that he was convicted of, that does not necessarily mean that PNC was part and parcel to the terrorism. In any case, if your answer is a yes, most likely the sitting government would by now ensure that PNC is no more, because there is nowhere in this world where a political party continues to execute its duties, while on the other hand, it does support terrorism. So I want to maybe perhaps get your I want you to substantiate that yes, he could have been a senior member of PNC, but whatever he did, most likely were individual acts of participating in terrorism. That is why we literally see PNC participate even in your local government elections that are coming on board, because as a political party, most likely it does not believe and or support terrorism. But with Abdul Kadir, perhaps that's an individual liability.
With all due respect, sir,
your internet seems to break, and I don't know whether we have some comments that we could perhaps read through, Rogers. There are so many, and I will have to begin with Teresa. Or otherwise, that we have had influencers inciting sedition and violence. That's what I think Rogers was talking about. We have, I don't know whether I have any outstanding comments, but there are so many, and most of...
I think it's the same Teresa, who says our vice president is a person of impeccable character. He's not corrupt. The man is involved in corruption allegations. I did not say that he's convicted of corruption. So, but why I brought that was to put a thesis, a theory of, you cannot say that PPP, for example, is corrupt because of corruption allegations by one of its members. That is what I was trying to compare to the PNC, because the gentleman Winston said that PNC, he talked about the party, not the individual. It does not necessarily mean that because the person was a member of the party, it means that whatever he was doing, the party was part and parcel of that process that was happening. If he was a terrorist, it doesn't necessarily mean that the party was a part of that process. And that I was only questioning in line with his facts of saying that you must not give misinformation. Yet he is the one who came to his social media platform, general platforms like he said, and said that the party is a part of the terrorism. So I don't understand. That is what I was trying to understand. I was trying to get a picture from him painted. But let's move on. I'm very glad that he's also back.
Sir, I do not want you to twist my words. I never said the PNC was involved in terrorism. Let me show you the connection once again. Abdul Kadir, which was a leading member of the PNC, he served as mayor and he served as member of parliament for the PNC, right? Which means that he is a part of the PNC in high regard. He had his corruption, his terrorist, whatever, and he is connected to the PNC, So there's a connection between the PNC and terrorism. All right? There's a connection between the PNC and terrorism. I never said PNC is involved in it, but there's a connection at the highest level.
You see, Mr. Winston, here is the thing. I am not arguing with you on whether the man was a terrorist or not. What I want now you to make, because you're saying that the PNC is being connected to the terrorist, it was a part of that and all that. Do you have facts to back that up, that PNC was connected to the terrorism he was making? Facts is what I want to understand.
Yes, the facts are in the report. The facts are in the reports. The facts are evidence that were laid against Mr. Abdul Qadir in the court here in the United States. Those are now public records.
The facts about the involvement of the PNC, not Abdul. I'm not talking about Abdul. I'm talking about
Sir, I don't know why I don't know why we keep, brother. I don't know. All right. It's the same thing. If a PPP person in leadership position, a PPP person in leadership position, once you are placed out there as a leader of an organization.
Your network is breaking. Oh, God.
I don't know whether you're back. If you're back, kindly proceed, but also to draw a distinction between a political party and, I mean, what confuses me with my understanding is where you want to believe that PNC is in support of what Abdul Qadir did, but also the same party continues to operate. I mean, the two don't connect. Otherwise, unless Mr. Rodgers wishes to communicate that the sitting government of PPP is also corrupt because their prime minister, vice president rather, is also alleged of being corrupt. You were making some submission, and we have around 3 or so minutes. May you please proceed, sir?
I don't want you to. I wish we'd had an opportunity to talk about the PNC's involvement in the electoral fraud, the allegations leveled against the PPP of discriminating against blacks in Guyana. I wish we had an opportunity to talk about the allegations of Guyana being in an apartheid state. And I wish we had the opportunity to talk about so many other things, but you guys seem to just want to label home and to hammer on this point that I say that the PNC is connected to terrorism, and I never said that. I said that the PNC practiced terrorism, or whatever is the words you keep using, Norman. But I never said that. Again, I say there's a connection, and I've showed you laboriously so that connection between the political party and a convicted terrorist. These are not allegations. This is a person that was brought before the court in the United States and were convicted based on evidence that was presented to the court.
The PPP government done to ensure that it manages this whole thing of PNC, if true that it has connections, or rather, of course, believes or has connections to such terrorism acts, because literally in any other country where indeed the leadership is that strong and believes in its institutions, you would perhaps have PNC deregistered in the event that there are, any symptoms of their support towards illegal, and their facts. Yeah, sure. So wouldn't you think that it would be fair for the PPP government to deregister PNC on that fact alone?
The government cannot deregister the PNC. That's not how our democracy works in Guyana. Maybe you guys are accustomed to that in your part of the world, respectfully, but that's not how it works in Guyana. That's not how it works on this side of the world. A political party cannot deregister another political party. A political party is deregistered by the voters, albeit not in those shiny languages, but is being delegitimized by the voters. And in 2020, the voters in Guyana has shown the PNC that they are no longer fit to rule, hence the reason they elected the People's Progressive Party Civic after the People's Progressive Party Civic had lost the election just a mere 5 years before that. So the people of Guyana are who are going to determine the fate of the PNC. And they have already shown an indication based on the 2020 elections and what we are seeing here, what we're seeing happening in the local government elections so far. The people are who are going to show the PNC that the type of politics that they're practicing in Guyana, the people are rejecting that politics. They've shown it before, and they'll continue to show it. In a democracy, a political party cannot be deregistered by another political party. That's not how we operate here.
Okay, a quick one from you, from me to you, and then you'll respond. Has PNC issued any statement in regards to their senior member's conviction on terrorism charges?
This happened a while ago. I know that once they came back into power in 2015, sometime in that time when David Granger served as president, they seek to honor him in the National Assembly, Mr. Abdul Qadir in the National Assembly. And that was a disgrace. That was a travesty for our country. It was a bad look for our country, because regardless of what...